It may have been some time since you formally studied, but even so, have you ever thought about how you learn best? In this video, we explore some of the metacognitive skills that will help you in your professional learning. Unless you've completely missed the point, schools are all about learning. While your function as a trustee has a different focus, to ensure the environment, structures and guidelines are in place to facilitate learning, it's worth reflecting for a moment on what learning is, as it will have implications for you as you go through the professional learning in this video series. Actually, a good starting point for discussions may be to ask whether the school leadership has a concise definition of learning. While seemingly a harmless question, on the one hand, actually defining what learning can be frustratingly difficult, while on the other, many schools haven't actually been through the process of having these discussions, despite the fact that learning is at the heart of what we do. So what are the implications for you, with all of your life experience and professional experience, but now taking the initiative to learn more about your roles and responsibilities as a trustee? First would be to bring your awareness of the metacognitive skills, learning about learning, thinking about thinking. The fact that I ask sometimes that you suspend judgment or preconceived ideas is to allow your brain to create new connections and ideas, since otherwise you'd only be left with the mental maps and models that you already have, in which case there would be no reason to learn anything new, unless it simply validated what you already thought you knew. Now, there's an interesting way to view the stages of learning, which may help put it into some perspective for you, which goes a bit like this. In the first stage, unconscious incompetence, you don't actually know what you don't know. As a young child, you wouldn't know that you can't drive a car. Before you were a trustee, you would have had no idea about the terms such as generative governance. The second stage of learning is conscious incompetence. So the young child gets a bit older and realizes that he or she doesn't actually know how to drive a car. As someone interested in governance of an international school, you may have come across the term generative governance, but really have no idea what it means. The third stage of learning is conscious competence, where a child is now a teenager learning to drive. Driving's possible, but it takes all concentration to steer and change gear, and having music on would be a total distraction. As a trustee, you and your colleagues maybe set aside time to use some case studies to practice generative governance, but have to be fully conscious of all the potential forms of bias along the way. And finally, the stage of unconscious competence, where a driving test is a few years behind you in the rearview mirror, and you can drive while listening to music and chatting, and can hardly even remember the route that you took, since the actual driving came as second nature to you. As a trustee, you'll get to the stage of swapping modes of governance numerous times during a meeting, and model good practice to new trustees on the board. So in recognizing that there's a natural flow through learning can help you when you begin to feel bombarded by new materials or ideas. It's quite natural to feel a little confused as you move in and out of the phases around conscious competence, and your mind is trying to process these new ideas. And that's a good thing. This is the stage when the brain is actually making new neural connections and trying to make sense of things. Now, research also tells us that there are a few other techniques that are proven to improve learning, irrespective of whether the learning is in the classroom or in the professional environment. So in addition to metacognition, setting clear goals and having structure in your learning certainly help in assimilating new information. Collaborative learning, feedback and questions are important, and these aspects become more apparent through workshops, but equally can be developed as trustees begin to have professional discussions about the process of governance, rather than just focusing on the issues within the school. The benefits of this series of videos is that it allows for all trustees to work through the materials at their own pace, but to also engage in professional discussions about topics and observations. This video series also looks at case studies that will challenge your thinking and engage a different aspect of problem solving in your brain. And of course, repetition and familiarity. The first time you hear some of the terms related to governance, they may feel vaguely familiar, but you may be unsure of exactly how they relate to you. But through this video series and multiple exposure to the ideas and concepts, you'll develop a deeper appreciation for the challenges of effective governance. And we, of course, have to consider how you access the information in the first place. For thousands of years, humans have evolved and developed language so that we may communicate better. Storytelling is such a powerful, hardwired strategy for communication, and I believe that this is where some of the power of these videos comes into play, since you're able to listen to material while allowing your brain to think in parallel about your specific situations. Personally, I find this process of parallel thinking much harder when I'm reading a text, since it takes far more brain power to decode the letters on a page into a formulated language, that if my mind starts drifting, I realize that I haven't understood anything I was reading. And yet in my experience, it's often exactly these moments where we let our mind drift slightly that we're most likely to tap into our creative mind, where deep learning can take place. So decoding text and understanding the nuance of the written language is a real skill in itself. But of course, when the content may not be as gripping, then it can become a chore to read for learning. As an interesting aside, you may have wondered about the process of reading, and if you hear yourself in your head reading the words, and what pace is the most comfortable for you to read at. Of course, that begs the question whether the pace is comfortable because that's the pace you can hear yourself say the words, or whether you could actually recognize the words faster, which gets you looking at speed reading techniques. So whether you hear yourself speaking the words is one thing, but of course visual clues, diagrams and images are considerably more powerful, both in terms of accessing information and recall. Some people have a very good visual memory in that they can remember an image clearly in their mind. And that's why, of course, these videos can be far more impactful than trying to read a book on school governance. Then, of course, there are those people that actually learn and operate best with tactile things. And there's certainly a place for that at all levels of education. We tend to think of small children using tactile play equipment as they move from understanding the concrete world around them to more abstract concepts. But the use of manipulators tends to decrease. Of course, there are sports, art, design, science, experiments, etc., where equipment needs to be used. But by and large, children are able to conceptualize and think in increasingly abstract terms. There's still a place for physically manipulating things to help learning, whether through collaborative exercises, say on strategic planning, where you may want to rearrange sticky notes or arrange ideas into different piles or lists. Now, there's obviously a lot more to the concepts of learning, but at this stage, suffice to say that it's totally normal to feel like there's a lot of information and perhaps the sense that you almost get it. And that's actually a great position to be in. There's some great educational work that was started by Vygotsky around the people being in the zone of proximal development. This is the Goldilocks zone of learning. Too easy and you get bored and switch off. Too difficult and you can't access the information and you switch off. And when you're in the zone, there's just the right level of challenge so you can scaffold your thinking and develop new, deeper insights. Finally, just think about some of your New Year's resolutions or self-promises to diet or exercise more. Much as you want to, you can't go to the gym once and hope to be fit at the end of it. Change happens incrementally, but through consistent application. And the same is true for learning. It's hard to sit and consume data as if we could all plug ourselves into some program in the matrix and just upload the facts. No, it takes time, effort, and practice to expand your knowledge, vocabulary, and skills. The critical aspect of these videos is not simply to let the words wash over you and hope that by some magical process of osmosis they'll be sucked up into your brain. No, you need to engage mentally in the process. So at times, you may be daydreaming about a new idea that's been sparked by something that was said, something that could be developed, or some insight that you want to explore. Other times, you may need to consciously ask yourself, so what? What are the implications for me in my school? Are there takeaways that I can learn Or are there areas that that maybe there's gaps in our thinking? And it's only through the personalization of the information shared that it will truly change the way you think and behave. Benjamin Bloom first devised his taxonomy of learning 70 years ago, which has been used for generations to view effective learning and teaching strategies. It actually depicts a hierarchy of learning and of increasing complexity and sophistication. And at the basic level, it's just got remembering, basic recall of facts. It builds on that to understand, can you explain ideas or concepts? Building on that to apply, can you use information in new situations? Can you analyze, can you draw connections between ideas and concepts? Can you evaluate, justify a viewpoint, having thoroughly researched options? And finally, to create, can you produce new or original work? While there's certainly a place for rote learning of facts, that type of learning only takes us so far. And with Google and AI, the recollection of facts has a lesser value. But the higher order thinking skills are clearly what's required of a successful student, whether you're a child in a school or here in a professional capacity. In order to move your mindset from remember and understand phases of learning to the deeper and more profound learning experiences, you need to push yourself to those apply the new information in your own current situation, to really analyze your work in the board through a critical lens so that you're making informed decisions and opinions. This doesn't happen effectively unless you're consistently pushing yourself in that direction. Conscious thought and reflection helps cement neural networks and new connections. So each time you think and analyze a situation, you're strengthening those brain connections. A mini brain workout that makes it stronger and more likely to see the applications. If we take Bloom's taxonomy, as it's called, and extend it to reflect active learning techniques, then it might be apparent that simply sitting there listening to me talking is all part of the passive learning domain. And at best, with the occasional graphics, like the one I'm showing now, might lead to around 50% effectiveness in being memorable. If you want to push beyond passive learning to active learning, then you need to engage with with the materials in a different way, being more purposeful and more personalized. If you have the opportunity to discuss and share ideas with your fellow trustees, then this is ideal. But there are still things you can do even if you're sitting at home or in your office watching these videos. But it will take perseverance to be effective. Water flows down the path of least resistance, and as humans, we too form patterns and habits that require the least expenditure of energy. While it is easy to sit and try to soak up information, remember that what's most critical is not remembering the content, but applying this to your own context. The aim is to create new neural pathways connecting new ideas to help solve old problems. And these neural networks only form when you're thinking deeply, discussing, synthesizing, or otherwise using the content to stimulate comparisons with your own prior experience. So these videos are designed as a low-calorie workout, if you like, to access the information, allowing you to expend your energy on the most critical phase of learning, those deep and profound reflections on your current situation and what you can do to move it forwards. For that reason, each of these videos ends with a reflection exercise, the most critical element of the learning. Whether you think about it immediately is up to you. You may prefer to pose the question to your unconscious part of your brain, to mull it over during the day. But your learning will only be enhanced by meaningful and consistent reflection. If you can write down some notes, enduring thoughts, or pointers for further action, these are all valuable, as the process of writing in your own words also helps connect different pathways to the brain, connecting language centers with conceptual understandings that you have formed. Now that you've begun thinking about thinking and how you learn, what might you want to do differently to be more effective in your role?